Next up, taking a peek at the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen of the Wrangler. Now, a few things to point out before we get started. This is the optional 7-inch cluster screen we're going to find inside of some versions of the Wrangler. Outside of that, it's going to be a little bit smaller, like a 3.5 inch compared to the 7-inch here. And inside of the smaller one, it's not customizable, whereas this one is. So if you are looking for a walkthrough on that screen, if it's available, check down in the description below. Otherwise, let's dive into it. So, a few things to point out. The wheel inside of the Wrangler might be heated or might not, just depending on which trim level of the vehicle that you're in. This specific one does have the heated steering wheel option, and we've got our switch just off to the side here. So we've got our little switch here in order to toggle the heated steering wheel on off, but it's nice, like it feels really, really good. But let's go through some things. The steering wheel itself is going to be a manual telescoping, so just by our left knee, you can see my fingers kind of pointing there. We're just going to drop down, telescoping, so in, out, up, and down as necessary. Once you've got that perfect position, click it, log it back into place. Now, stick on the left-hand side, we can flash at our high beams, we've got our turn signals. On the right side, we've got the option of adjusting what's going on with our front and our rear windshield wiper on top of that, which is great. Now, you're going to have a series of different buttons here that are going to be dependent on which packages you have inside the vehicle. So on the right-hand side here, this is for our regular cruise control. So we can toggle the system on, off, etc. Once you found your perfect speed, you're going to increase, decrease 1 kilometer or 1 mile per hour at a time. But we've also got the option for the adaptive cruise control system, so we'd have a series of other buttons that were available here. The one in the middle there would essentially turn on that cruise system, and then we can adjust what's going on with our distance as well. So if you've got the Wrangler with the adaptive cruise control system, it's really straightforward to use, but you're going to increase or decrease your distance there. If you want to walk through on how to use the adaptive cruise system in Jeep vehicles, check down in the description below because I have put together a comprehensive walk around there. But buttons off to the left-hand side are going to be standard across the Wrangler lineup. So two different pads, I guess. We've got the main directional pad, which is going to let us move through the cluster screen. Then we've got this mini pad off to the side, so we can answer or hang up on a phone call. We've also got our voice command prompt. So by pushing that prompt, we can do things like change songs, radio stations, we can navigate using our voice. If we were hooked up through Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, we could also do a longer press and hold there in order to be able to activate either our Google or our Siri Assistant. So that is nice to know. But my goodness, I love the look of the wheel. It's nice. The wheel actually does feel really comfortable in the hand too, which is great. But we've got some other buttons too. So let's go through these ones and I'll show you a few others. So a few buttons here are going to control what's going on that screen. So let's zoom in a tiny little bit and focus you in on that little cluster screen. Perfect. All right, so what we're doing is going up and down, back or forward, or pressing OK. So we've got our main screen there, so we go up and down between subscreens. We can also press if we want to have our digital screen showing kilometers or miles per hour. So it's just a single button press there to activate. Moving down, we've also got our vehicle information, and then you can see there, so as we go through some of these other screens, we've got multiple screen views. So this is just a single view, but when we go down to page 2, we've got this other little one right along the bottom there, and that's going to let us move left and right now between different subscreens. So we've got our tire pressure. We can also tweak that out so it's showing bar, but we can adjust it to PSI, which I'll show you in a second. But we've got our coolant temperature, transmission temp, oil pressure, oil life, and you can see on some of these things we can also reset. So in order to reset, you're changing oil yourself, etc. We just press and hold the OK button in order to reset that out instead. Moving down, we've got our off-road status, so we can see what's going on. You can see as I rotate the wheel, it's going to just out and let us know how much we have the wheel turned, which is fantastic. From there, we can also see our vehicle pitch and roll, so we can see what angle the vehicle's currently on. So again, very, very useful if you're off-roading inside of this thing. Moving down, we also have our fuel economy. So we've got fuel economy as well there, so our range. So we've got a few options, but all we have to do, if we want to reset, we just press and hold OK. And you can see there, it's okay, defaulted to not really a great average, and that's because I'm literally just sitting here, but that's going to be dynamic just based off of what you're doing with the vehicle. Moving down, we've got our trip counter, so trip counter A versus B. And same idea, if we want to be able to reset any of these counters, we just press and hold OK, and a few seconds in, and it's reset it for us there. Moving down, we've also got our start-stop system, so we do have the flexibility of turning that start-stop system off. It's going to be dynamic, so whether or not that happens. So the start-stop button itself, just off to the side here, so we can see that little A button there. But it's dynamic in the sense that the start-stop system's not always going to turn the vehicle off, so temporarily. But it's just because we've got cooling going in the vehicle, so it's essentially up to the vehicle when it's going to actually turn the engine off, so with that start-stop system. And moving down from there, you can see that we've got our audio as well. Down again into messages, so if we had any messages available in the vehicle. And then we've also got our screen setup, and then back to our home. So screen setup, if we press OK, we've got the flexibility of adjusting what's going on with certain elements of the screen, which, I mean, I love that we've got that flexibility. So if you wanted to adjust some things, it's what do you want to have showing? Do you want to have the digital speed up there, nothing showing, compass, time, etc.? You've got different options for gear display. So do you want to have it single versus full? You can see on the bottom there it's updating to either have all the gears available or just a single gear available. So it's going to be a matter of preference what's showing up there, but it is really cool that we've got the flexibility to adjust that. And like I said, upper left, we've got the flexibility to go upper right. We can bring everything back to the factory default there instead. So if we played around with it too much, we can adjust it. We can show our height or our odometer on top of that. Moving into our favorites menu to show what's showing on that screen, we can kind of adjust out there as well. We've got our gear display, which I did show you earlier. So it is nice that we've got that available as an option, and that's right from the factory there, which is kind of cool. And like I said, this is the larger 7-inch screen, which gives us that customizable flexibility. When you get the other one, the 3.5 inch instead, it's not going to have the same customizable options that are available. But a few other things to point out. Along the left-hand side, we've got our tachometer. Along the right-hand side, we've got our speedometer. You don't have the option from the factory in order to be able to adjust this out, though. So this is going to be just a regular analog gauge. So if you're going out of the States, whatever the case may be, you do have to rely on the digital one in that screen instead, or you're coming up to Canada, etc. But you can also see we've got our current mileage there. So how much mileage do we currently have on the vehicle? We've got all of our transmission temperature as well as our current fuel levels there off to the right side. And you can see there, we've got another little gauge off to that side there. So are we in 2 high, 4 high, neutral, or 4 low? And that's all adjusted through this little guy. So let's brighten you up there a little bit. So you can see there, we've got a few different shifters. So we've got our main shifter there to change between park, reverse, neutral, drive, or our manual mode. And then we also have the additional shifter to go 2 high, 4 high, neutral, or 4 low. 2 high is where you want to be the majority of the time. 4 high if you're in like snowy or like icy conditions. Neutral, obviously, for neutral towing, whatever the case may be. And then 4 low if we're going to be doing like aggressive rock crawling or heavy towing and things like that. So we've got a ton of different options that are available inside of this thing, which is fantastic. But one other thing to point out, and that's what's going on in behind the steering wheel here. So we've got a few different pads that are available. So the one off to the left-hand side, it's so cool. But we've got a pad there off to the left side in behind the steering wheel. So a series of buttons there. That one's going to let us change between all of our different stations there. So you can see we're going currently between Sirius XM stations. We can push in the middle there as well if we wanted to jump between all of our different presets. And then off to the right side of the steering wheel, we can also press in the middle here if we wanted to change out sources. So we've got AM, FM, Sirius XM, etc. And then we've got our volume rocker. So on the left-hand side, we can adjust what station we're in, so we're seeking there. Off to the right side, we can easily adjust our volume if we need to. That is amazing. Like, the song is fantastic, but it sounds great because this one has the upgraded audio system, so the Alpine sound system. A lot of information I know. Now, one thing to point out, if you want to walk through in that media screen, check down in the description below. But I know lots of information covered off there, though. But that's everything you need to know about the steering wheel and the cluster screen inside of the Wrangler.